This video is going to be on Module 3, Maintaining a Database. So once you've created a database and then loaded it with data, you must then maintain it. When we talk about maintaining a database, it means modifying the data to keep it up to date by adding new records, changing the data for existing records, and deleting records. Updating can include a mass update, or a mass deletion, or simply doing it individually. So we're going to work on maintaining a database. The CMF veterinarian practice faces the task of keeping its database up to date. As the practice takes on new vendors, it will need to add new records, make changes to existing records, and delete records. CMF believes that it can serve its vendors better by changing the structure of the database to categorize the vendors by type of products they supply. The company will do this by adding a product type field to the veterinary vendors table. Additionally, the practice manager has realized that appointments need to be streamlined. Because appointments might involve more than one treatment, the appointment field will be a multi-valued field, which is a field that can store multiple values or entries. Along with these changes, CMF wants to change the appearance of the data sheet when displaying the data. CMF would like the ability to make mass updates, that is, to update or delete many records in a single operation. It wants rules that limit users to entering only valid or appropriate data into the database. CMF also wants to ensure that the database can only or cannot contain the names of a patient that is not associated with a specific owner. This figure here, 3-1, summarizes some of the various types of activities involved in maintaining the CMF database. So the first step in this module is to obviously open up the CMF Vets database from Module 3. I'm going to enable my content so that I can get started. And we have all the things that were created in Module 1 and 2 there. So all we need to do is get started with our maintenance of our database. So the first thing they want to do is they want to add some records. So in order to add some records, they're going to keep it simple by creating a split form. And with that split form, we will then be entering the data. So we're going to start with the veterinary vendors table. We'll just click on that, and I've selected it so that it knows that I want to work with that table. I'll go to the Create tab, and I'm going to create a split form. So as you can see, there's tables, queries, and forms. So I'm going to choose More Forms. And in that drop-down list, I can choose a split form. So I've created a split form, and you'll see that it has the table at the bottom, and it's split into a form. So basically, this is a form and a table put together. And when we enter new information into the form, it will pop up down there in the table. So we've created the form. Remember that when we see these dashed lines around there, it means that they have, this whole thing is in layout view. So we're going to need to change that so that it's in form view. There's two ways, of course, to do that. The first is that you could come up here into the view side on the very top left-hand corner, use the drop down and put it into form view that way. The other is, of course, down the bottom there, beside where it says numlock. You have a form view, a layout view, and a design view. So now that we are in our form view, we can then add a new record. So if I wanted to add a new record, I can just go down into the bottom here where it says record, 1 of 5. And there's actually an arrow with a little star beside it. And I can just click on that and enter a new blank record. So I'm going to enter a new blank record, and it comes up as new, which is just exactly what I want to see. And then I'm going to be entering a new record. So that new record comes up as number 6. So I'm just going to tab through, and I haven't done anything yet, so it's not saying I have to do anything. So as soon as I start typing, it will pop up there and auto number the ID. So this is Global Pet Supply. So Global Pet Supply, and it's 1001 Western Way. And that's going to be in Dallas, Texas, TX. And the zip code is 70001. And you'll notice it's coming up down the bottom there, which is exactly where we want it to come. And the ID came in at number 6, so it was auto-completed. And this is feline leukemia vaccine. And they have 50 on hand for a total of $9.75. Okay, so we have created the Global Pet Supply. If I made an error, I can come down to my table and I could change it down here, or I could change it up here in the actual form input area. Okay, so I want to then make sure that I save this form. So I'm going to save that form. So what I'm going to do is I'll just close this, and it will ask me if I want to save it. I need to put my tables up there, my tabs up there, so I need to do that as well. So I will close that. And it says, do you want to save the changes? And I do want to save the changes. And this says veterinary vendors is my name of my form. So I can say yes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name to veterinary vendors split form. Split form. Okay, so it's saved as veterinary vendors split form. Okay. Now, because I had a new computer, my top save as are not there. So what I'd like to do is I would like to fix that. So if you bear with me, I will do that. So I'm going to go down to my options. I will go to my customize my ribbon, and I want my quick access toolbar. I picked the wrong one. And I have save, undo, and redo, but I like save as. So I'm looking for my save as to add. And I think I'm going to move that, drop that down. So I want undo, redo, and then my save as button to be there. Say OK. And now I'm just going to double check my veterinary form is there, and my save as button is right there. Perfect. So we should be good to go with that. We're going to do a simple search, because sometimes you may just want to look something up quickly without creating a query. So the veterinary company actually just wants to do a quick search to see which vendor sells microchips. So we can do a quick search. If we go into our vendors veterinary vendors split form, and we just open that up, we can do a quick search simply by using the find button. So this find button, right now we could probably find it pretty quickly. We can see that there's microchips in there, but what happens if we had, 1,000? It would make it much quicker to do it this way. So we're just going to go into the find button. And we're not looking to replace, because we've seen this in Word and Excel, etc. that they have the find and replace. It sounds pretty much so the same as everywhere else. So right now I had my cursor in the ID, which is fine as long as I fix the field so that it doesn't just search in the ID field. So I want to find microchips. Okay, and I'm going to look in the current document maybe. And do I want to match the whole field? Yeah, maybe I do because I want the whole field to be in there. So I will just say find it. It found the word microchips in my veterinary supply. That's what they supply. I could have left it into that specific field if I had had my cursor in the veterinary supply field. So we found the veterinary vendor that supplies microchips. So that's good. I'll just say cancel. We found it. It selected it. So we're not going to replace anything or do anything with it. We just want to know how we would do a quick search. Our next task here is to update the contents of a record. So we're going to change the name of the veterinary vendor ID 3 from Mayer's Supply Corporation to Mayer's Supply LLC. So I have this sitting right up here. They produced microchips and they happen to be the one I was looking for. But if that wasn't the case, I could come into the vendor's name and just type the word Mayer's and it would have come up with the vendor. So what we want to do, that we entered it incorrectly, and it should say not Mayer's Supply Corporation, it should say Mayer's Supplies LLC. Okay, so I'm going to change that to LLC. Okay, so we've got that, we've put that in, and when I click off of it, of course, it automatically updates. Our next task, looking here, is maybe we have a vendor that we want to get rid of that we just need to delete. So we want to delete Sanchez Supplies. So if I go up into here and I'm going to type in Sanchez, and in this case, I will say that I'm going to select in the current field, and I'm not going to match case, and I will match any part of the field that says Sanchez. It says Sanchez Supplies. Thank you very much. I found them. So we have Sanchez Supplies up there. We wanted to find out what where that record was. And what do we want to do with that? We want to delete the record. Okay, so we have number 5 has come up down here. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. Of course, you can right mouse button click and delete the record. You can come up to here, up into the records and push delete. So we want to delete the record. Now, one of the things about deleting a record is you have to be careful because it is gone forever. There is no undo here. So you're about to delete this record. You can't undo it. Are you sure you want to do this? And lots of times we say yes without really thinking it through. But we're going to say yes because we thought it through. And the one thing you'll notice now is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. The ID number is not going to change just because we deleted 5. 6 does not become a 5. Okay, so now we can tell that something happened to 5. This is automatically generated, and I think 5 was deleted. So that is that piece right there. Okay, so now I'm going to close the veterinary split form, and I'm going to actually open up the veterinary vendors table, and we're going to do some filtering. Now, right now we don't have very much data in here, but the filtering will work the same regardless of how much data we actually have. So the first thing we're going to do is use the filter by selection, and this is where we select the field that we want to do the filtering by. So for example, if I select Blanding, so I want to filter the city by Blanding, then I can do my filtering. This is selecting. So I've selected in this field and I can do my filtering that way. So you'll notice there's a few things in the sort and filter area. We have the filter, ascending, descending, selection. If I have a drop down arrow there, I can choose to say whether it equals blanding or maybe I want everything but blanding. So that would be a does not equal blanding, a does not contain blanding, or contains blanding. So I'm going to just say equals blanding. And I have 2 vendors that live in the city of Blanding. So I can see that I've got the filter on, it's toggled. So the city equals Blanding, and now I have filtered by all of them. So I would use this filter just sort of as a quick note, and I could still print this page if I wanted to. So down here as well, you'll shows that the filter is on. So I can click down here to remove the filter. I can toggle that off, or I can toggle the filter up here. So I'll remove that filter. And now it's not filtered by anything anymore. So by selection simply says you put it in the field and you do it by selection. So we have that all cleared off. We toggled the filter off. We can also use that what's known as a common filter. So in our common filter, we can see that we have drop-down arrows that are already there that allow, these are common filters, so they could be on any field at all. And they're simply common filters that allow us to choose or clear the filter from the city if we wanted to, or select any of those specifics. So I could choose Blanding this way, and it would do the Blanding via the common filter. So I'll clear that filter. I can also have it text filters that begins with, and I can say begins with B, and it will give me Blanding that way as well. So I'll clear the filter from the city. I can use a filter by form, and maybe I want to do that one. These can be used for filters that involve multiple fields. So filter by form would allow us to filter based upon multiple fields and criteria. So for example, filter by form would allow you to find only those vendors in Colorado whose quantity order is greater than 75, for example. So we're going to use the advanced filter. So we have the advanced filter down there. We have cleared all of our filters and we have it ready to go. So we're going to filter by form. So we want to just now tell it exactly what we're looking for. So it says that we want them to be from Colorado. So we're going to click on the state and we could choose Colorado. And then we're going to do the quantity. And instead of the drop-down list, because they have the exact quantities, we want it to be greater than, so greater than 75. Okay, so we have that. That's all we need to do, and we're going to toggle the filter on. Okay, so we have one person that lives in Colorado that had a quantity greater than 75. So you could play with that, add any types of filters that you wanted, or sorry, any type of criteria you wanted, and that works just fine. So we will toggle the filter, and we will clear all filters right here. So now all filters are gone. This time we're going to use an advanced filter and sort. So sometimes your criteria that you're looking for is just way too complex to filter by form. You might decide you want to include any vendor in Colorado whose quantity is greater than 75, and you might want to include any account whose quantity is lower than 40, no matter which state they are on. Or you may want or you may want them sorted a different way as well. So the advanced filter sort is going to support more complex stuff. So we're going to choose the advanced filter. And this looks like a query. And that's really one of the keys, is that it does look like a query. So what we want is we have our veterinary vendors table up there. That's the one that we were working on. So it jumped in there. So we want to make sure that we have cleared all of our filters. Oops, I toggled it back on. So we've cleared them all. I'll go back in there. And then what we want to do is we want to add the vendor name in this case. And we want that to be ascending. So we said that we want to include any vendors in Colorado. So obviously we need the state. And I'm just reading this. Any vendors in Colorado whose quantity is greater than 75. So we want quantity. So greater than 75 and any who is lower than 40. So we want quantity of greater than 75 for Colorado. Oops. I put in the wrong spot. Let's just ignore that. I put in the wrong spot. So we want greater than 75 and in Colorado. So CO. In our criteria. Or we want anybody in any state that is less than 40. Further, you might want to have the results sorted by account name. Okay, so it looks like we have vendor's name is sorted ascending. The state of Colorado and greater than 75 quantity, or any other state that's less than 40. Okay, so I think we've got that. So now we can look at this and toggle that filter that we have created. So instead of a run that we would have had if we were doing it via query, we just toggle the filter. So we have two. We have the one that we had before, which was in Colorado, that's greater than 75. And we also have somebody that has less than 40, and that's Rodriguez Vet Supplies. Okay. So that is one way that we would create filters. There's different types of filters that we can use. Filters are quicker, and we would use a query if we wanted to do the same thing over and over again, depending upon our data that we have. But we might want to do a filter like this if it's just something quick that we only need to do one time, or the variables are too mixed. Okay, so I'll close all those. I'm not going to save that at all. I don't want to save any changes here, so make sure you don't save the changes. And we'll start back here, and then we're going to start looking at our database structure. So when we first create a database, we initially start with a structure. So we assign names to it, we assign data types to it, field sizes, etc. But lots of times when we first begin, it doesn't end up being correct. So we have to fix our database structure. So maybe it could be that the field size is no longer, or the field is no longer necessary in that table. We don't use it. Or it could mean that we want to add a field that we hadn't had in there before, or we want to create lookup values or drop-down lists or all sorts of things. So we initially create it, but we always have to make changes to our database structure. So that's what we're going to be looking at, is different ways of fixing our database structure. So the first thing we're going to do is change a number field size, and we're going to do all of our changes in design view. That's the easiest, smartest way to do that. So we are going to open up the veterinary vendors, and we're going to open that up in design view. So I'm going to right mouse button click and click on design view. However, I could also go up to my views button here. And the first thing I'm going to do is change the quantity. And I'm going to change the quantity type. Right now it's a number, and I'm good with a number, except for the field size is long integer. Now, one of the things that we look at with field sizes is that we have to allow all different types of values in some cases. So for example, if we have a quantity in the vendor types, they may need decimals in their vendor quantities because they may be in portions. Whereas if you had, say, the number of children, they can't have 1.2 kids, right? So it would have to stay as a long integer. But if we look at this, they will give you some information on what those different data types would be. So we're going to be looking at creating this to be a field size that is single. So if we do a drop-down list, we can see we have a byte, an integer, and of course an integer is has no decimals. A long integer just means it can be longer. Single means a single type. We can have single decimal, double, and we could have decimals. So we're going to choose single for now, and then we will change the format on that. So with our format, we're going to say that we want it to be fixed. So fixed means it stays at the same number of decimals that we choose. And we're also going to make sure that every time we make changes in our table, that we update the format everywhere that quantity is used. Because we want all of our updates to be applied to any time we have used this table in anything else. The form for the veterinary split form is going to be used for all of these. So we want to make sure that we update them for all of them. So our decimal places, we're going to make it at 2 decimal places, and we'll ensure that we update that as well. And I think that we've got that. So we want single, fixed, and 2 decimal places. So we've updated the properties. You can do it just once. I'd like to do it every time just to make sure that they're updated. But that way we've now got it so that our field size is not as an integer, so that we can put decimals in there. Now, one thing you must be careful is if you change this to something and save it, and you had decimals and you saved it to an integer, a long integer, then they would all be gone. If you made your decimal places 0 and you had decimal places in there, then you would lose all your decimal places and they wouldn't be just hiding. Okay, so we're also going to go in and add a new field. So the veterinary vendors table, or they want a, they've decided that they need to categorize the suppliers by adding an additional field. That additional field is going to be called product type. And we're going to put product type field immediately after the veterinary supply field. Okay, so veterinary supply, we are going to add a new field here. And if I insert a row, okay, it pops above. Just remember that. If you did it wrong, you can undo it. There's an undo here that you can do. But just make sure you click on the quantity, and we will insert a row, and it inserts above. And we want to call that product type. Okay, so we're going to create a product type. So they've said that they want 3 different values for product type. VAC, which indicates the vendor supplies vaccines. MC, which indicates that the vendor supplies microchips. And SUP, which indicates the vendor sells surgical supplies. So when that happens, we have to be very careful, or we have to be sure that we only want 3 things in there. So the best way to do that is to create what's known as a lookup field. So the lookup field simply says we want to create it so it creates a drop-down list for people. And the easiest way to do that is do it right here. So we can pick. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go to the lookup wizard. Okay, so the lookup wizard walks us through it. So the wizard is going to create the lookup field, and I have values that I want to type in myself, right? So we have the 3 values of VAC, MC, and SUP that we want to put in ourselves. So we will type in the lookup values that we want. The other option is that we will get the values from another table or a query, and we're not going to do that in this one. So we're going to keep it simple and type in the values that we want. I'll click next, and all I'm going to do is type in what the drop-down list is going to have. It's only going to have 1 column in this case, and I want VAC, I'm pushing tab, MC, tab, and SUP. Oops, SUP. So I have 3 values, VAC, MC, and SUP. And I'm just going to say next. And it has a label for my product lookup field. Product type is the one I want. The question here is I can limit it to list, which means that they can't put anything else that doesn't belong there. Now, that is one of the things that I would usually do. I'm not going to do that right now, so that if somebody puts the wrong thing in, that's okay. But limiting it to list can be a frustration for people entering forms if it doesn't fall within the list. The other one is allow multiple values. Now, allowing multiple values we're going to do next, but that's one of those where we simply say, okay, we can have more than 1 value checked. So it's like a square box versus a radio button. So we're going to finish, and it doesn't look like anything happened. And if you notice, short text is still there, which is okay. However, we do have another tab here of lookup, and on your tab down the bottom there is lookup. It shows that it's a combo box. It is a value list. The row source is VAC, MC, and SUP. So if I had made a mistake, I could go in here and fix it right here. And I don't think I made a mistake. It just has some other stuff that you don't really care about right now. And therefore, when I save that, so say for example, I'm just going to save my field. I'll go back into my data sheet view. And now if I look at my product type, I have a drop-down list, and I can choose from my drop-down list. Okay, so that's what it did, is it just created a drop-down list for us. Our next step is going to be that we're going to create the multi-valued field. And what that would do would allow us to have more than 1 service applied. So say for example, they have an animal that's coming in and it needs to get a rabies shot, it needs to have a wellness exam, and it needs to maybe have a microchip, right? So then when that appointment comes in, so we're going to be looking at appointments. So when they come in for an appointment, what their treatment number is, so for example, this one has a T3 treatment number, maybe we need more than 1 treatment. Okay, so we're going to be fixing that up. So what we're going to do is go into design view, and we're going to create a row. What are we doing here? Give me a second. Oh, so we want to add a treatment above the treatment number. So we're going to insert a row. So we'll insert a row. And what are we going to call it? I don't know, they didn't say. Service abbreviation and descriptions? Maybe. So we want to create a multi-valued field. So we're going to call it treatment number, although there is already one there. I'm not sure why we're doing it twice. I'm going to go to the lookup value, lookup wizard. We're going to type in the values we want. And in this case, we can do 2 columns. It doesn't say it wants 2 columns. But I'm going to make 2 columns and we'll see what happens. So we want T1. I'm just going to type in the values that are here. And we have a drop down here that says feline rabies. And I'll tab down, and T2 is dog wellness exam. And I'm going to fill in all of the treatments for this multi-valued field that is on page 3-22. So take the time to do that, and I'll pause the recording so that you don't have to listen to me go through all that. And then I'll have them all done, and then I'll come back just before I click next. Okay, so I entered the rest of those, but one thing I noticed, I looked a little bit forward. We're only going to have the 1 column in there. They only want the 1 column in there. So it just needed to go to T1 to T14. And if I want to get rid of that, I can just backspace out that and say I only want 1 column in there. And it will take away that other column, which is good, so I didn't lose anything. The other thing that seems to be a little bit of a problem is we have a double treatment number here. And I looked forward to see whether they were going to delete that other treatment number, but no. So we'll have to alter that when we get there. So we have our list in our lookup wizard. We started our list. We typed in all the values that we wanted. We said next. The label that we want for our lookup field is treatment number. This is probably going to cause a problem because we already have treatment number in there. So what I might have to do is leave it like that and then see what it does and then maybe change the name. The other thing that I want to do is allow multiple values. So I'm going to allow them to have numerous treatments, and it will store it as treatments like that, like with the numerous ones, so I can click. So that's good. It didn't give me a hard time, which I'm really happy about. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take my treatment number. So maybe I'll go and look first. I'll save it. You already have a field name named treatment number. That's what I thought was going to happen. It wasn't going to let me. So I'm going to just, the one that was not a lookup field, which is the one here, treatment number, called procedure, I'm just going to right mouse button click and delete that row. Now I know there's data in there. So one thing that I could do is treatment number, I'll just give it a B so that it'll let me save and I can see what data was in there. And I can see that they had treatments for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They had some treatments in there. But if we go forward a little bit, they give us the treatments actually that they're going to put in. So I'm going to actually end up deleting this field right here. So I can just delete it here or go back into my design view, and I will go in here and I will delete that row, and I'll permanently delete all the data that's in there. It says if you delete it, you're going to be in trouble, and I say yes, I'll do that anyway. And then I'll change the name back here to treatment number, and maybe I'll put the word procedure in there. Okay, so we got treatment number, and if I go back to my data sheet view, I'll save it, and in my treatments I have a drop down list, and you can see I can click on as many treatments as they're going to have. Now if I had put the second column in beside T1, which would have been a really good thing to do, I don't know why they didn't do it, would have been the treatment name Okay, so the treatment name would have made a lot of sense. So I could have just used the drop-down list, and that's what the column 2 would have been. It would have shown me what each treatment was. Okay, and then it would ask me which number I wanted to store, and I would have said I want to store T1 to T14. Okay, so we will leave that alone because we're not going to enter anything yet. We'll go back and deal with that in a little bit. So we're just going to close off these two tables and move on. So our next little step is going to be to create a calculated field. We did that before when we created a calculated field using Zoom. This time we're going to use the expression builder, and it's just a computed or calculated field. So what we want is the veterinary vendors table needs to have a calculated field that calculates the product of quantity and cost fields. Okay, so we're going to open up the veterinary vendors. We're going to go into design view. We're going to create a new field down the bottom. And this is going to be called total amount. So it's in a calculated field. This will not be something that can be altered by the user. It will be something that Access automatically calculates. So we're going to have it, it's going to be called total amount as the field name. In our data type, our drop-down list, we're going to use this calculated field. So we click on calculated. I could type it in, and most of the times the more you know Access, the faster it is to do that, because you just need to have brackets with field name and an operator, etc. So what we're going to do though is we're going to use the expression builder itself instead. So we have our veterinary vendors is the actual table that we're in, so it's good it found that. We're going to choose which field we want, and it wants quantity times cost. So I'm going to do quantity, so I'll double click. I'm going to push times, which is the star, and then I'll just double click cost. Okay, so it's quantity times cost, and I don't really need to get into the operators. Instead of typing in the star or the times, I could have typed in, gone to operators and chosen one, but it's just slower. So I have quantity times cost, and I'll just say okay. So it's a calculated field, and if we wanted to go look at it, we will go back to our data sheet view, and it says it must save the table first, and we're like, yeah, okay, we're good. And now if we look over here, we have our total amount, and it hasn't been formatted yet, but they haven't really told us to format it yet. We will do that soon. But our total amount is done by the program itself. So 50 times 4 and 65 times 8. So that is creating a calculated field in a table. Now we're going to look at some math changes. So sometimes we can go through and change things individually if it's not too time consuming, but other times we want to do a math update. So say for example, they did a area code change. Back in the day, our whole province used to be a 403 province, and then 780 came into effect. So everybody from, I don't even know where it was, I think it was Edmonton and North, needed to be a 780. So if you had a database and you needed to update the area codes for all these people, it would be really slow if you had to do it individually. So you can do a mass change or an update so that everybody who lives in this area would automatically change their area code to 780. So it just mass changes make things much quicker. So if we look here, we have only 5 vendors for veterinary vendors, and their product types are empty. So if most people had a product type of a vaccination, for example, we could update it, do an update query so that it would automatically update the product type for everybody in this field, and then change the ones that aren't or don't just do vaccinations. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an update query for the vendors table. Okay, so there's different types of query. We'll talk about those other types of queries as well in a bit. So we're going to start, and I'll just close this one, I don't need it. We're going to go to create, and we have different types of queries that we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to go into our query design. Okay, and in here we have different types of queries that go on. So we have an update query, a delete query, an append query, and a make table query. So we're going to start with the update query. So we can close this panel if it gets in your way. And we'll just have our query here. I should have had my table up and I didn't. So we put the veterinary vendors table there. And what we want to do is we want to choose update. And with that update here, we want to add product type because that's the field we want to update. So I'll double click product type in the table of veterinary vendors. And what do we want to update it to? Well, we just want to update it to say VAC, okay? Because we want everybody to have VAC. Now, one of the problems that comes back is once we run it, and then you think you did it wrong, and you go back and you run it again, and it doesn't update anything, it could be because it's already been done. So what we're going to do is we've done this once. We updated it to VAC, and it may be that we had criteria that we wanted to apply it to, so only those living in a certain area we would do that, but in this case we don't. So we want to update it. When we run the first time, it says that I'm going to update a certain number of rows, okay? And I'm like, okay, good. So it's going to update 5 rows. So I will say, okay, yes. But now if you notice, if I tried to do that again, like say I thought I did it wrong and I went back and ran it, and it shouldn't do it twice. Maybe it's because I didn't save it. So let's go back. It added product type, and we'll close the query. Let's see if they wanted it to stay. Click run. Yes to make the changes. And I don't think we need to save the query, so we will just close that. No, I don't. And then we'll go back to our navigation pane into our veterinary vendors, and we notice that it updated to VAC. But if we went back, and so now that I've saved that, if we went back and tried to do that again, it wouldn't work. Okay, so we can't do it again. So we're going to go and create. This time we'll do a query design, and we'll try and do it again. So if we wanted to update the veterinary vendors and the, what was it? Product type, and we said update them all to VAC. It shouldn't, but it might update it again. Oh yeah, it's going to update it again, so that's good. So if something comes up and it says there's no rows to update, then it wouldn't do it. Nope, I won't save that. And it's already been updated to VAC. So we've got the update query going. There are a couple of other queries that are of interest here that I'm not going to run, but I will show them to you. One is what's known as, and we have to be very careful with this one, is a delete query. So if I wanted to delete everybody in a specific area, and I chose a delete query, so everybody who lived in a specific city, for example, and you'll notice it says delete where, and you may say that anybody who was in a specific city. Once you do that delete, they are gone. So don't do a delete unless you're absolutely positive you want to delete them. So a delete will do a delete and complete it out. Okay, so on page 3-27, when you're asked to do a delete query or an append query, an append query is a little bit different, but if you need to do that, it's on page 3-37. An append query is a little bit different. Delete is pretty normal, that you delete the fields or the records that you don't want. But an append query is really one where it takes information from another source and adds it or appends it to your table that you have. Okay, so when you do an append query, you actually have to make sure that you have both pieces of data available. So that's on page 3-27 as well. Okay, so I'm not going to keep this delete query. Delete queries is kind of scary. In a make table query allows you to make a table that contains records from different tables. So you can make a table from other tables with certain pieces of that table. So that's another thing that you can do. So I'll close this. And I don't want to save changes, and I'll close the veterinary vendors table. So now we're going to create some specific rules, or otherwise known as validation rules. These rules are in place so that only specific data can be entered into your database. So for example, you don't want somebody to put their phone number in your postcode space, or you don't want somebody to type in a word in the phone number space, for example. These rules, when we put them in place, it's always best to actually explain our rules to people. So in other words, there's nothing worse than getting an error pop up that says invalid, 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 and you're like, what am I doing wrong? What's it supposed to have in here? So we're going to be working on some validation rules, and then of course putting in some text so that we explain to people what the issue actually is. So the first thing we're going to do is open up which one are we using? The veterinary vendors. We seem to be using this one a lot. So in our zip code, we're going to alter our zip code in here so that it can hold all of foreign zip codes as well as American zip codes. So we're going to change the zip code here, and we're just going to change the field size, and we will change that to 25. So we want 25 to be our field size for our vendors table, and we now changed it so that it's 25, or 20, sorry, 20, so that we can cover all of those. So we changed it to 20. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is specify that something is required. So in other words, you must enter this field. So we're going to specify that the vendor name field is required. So we click on the vendor name and our field properties come in. And if we see in here in our field properties, we can go down to required, and there is a no in there, and there is a drop down list. So we would say, yes, it's required. So these are just little tiny rules that say they must enter a text for a vendor name, otherwise how do we know who they are, right? The other thing we can do is specify that a range must be in there. In other words, say for example, the cost or the quantity. So for example, cost is going to be greater than 0 or less than a certain amount of money maybe. So we would tell it that there's a range of data that can be stored in there. So this one says that in the quantity field, okay, so in our quantity field, it must be greater than 0 and less than 1001. So to indicate this, we want to have both greater than and less than or equal to 1000, so that they put it between those two values right there. Okay, so we're really just making up some rules. So we're going to go into the validation rule right down here, and there's two ways of doing this. You can say that you want it to be greater than 0 and less than or equal to 1000. Okay? You could also use the word between. So you could say between 0 and. So any one of those can work. But you just got to be careful. If the rule is not good, it will tell you it's not a good rule, and it will come back with an error. So we put greater than 0 and, so we have to have an operator in there, less than or equal to 1000. And then where it says validation text, whatever you put in here, there's no rules really, but what you want to do is make it so that they understand what they do wrong if they're doing it wrong. So you would say must be between 0 and 1000. Okay, so this allows us to put in a validation text so that they know what they're doing wrong. Okay, so must be greater than, oh, they wanted it this way. So I'll put in exactly what they say so I don't get it marked wrong. So must be greater than 0 and at most 1000. And they put a comma in there, so I'm just doing that so that when they mark it, they will not mark me wrong. So what we did is created a rule that says the value in there must be that, and we created a text to tell it what's going to be wrong, what happens if they put the wrong number in. So we'll go and do some errors in here in a sec to see what happens. Another thing we're going to do is to specify a default value. So the product type, go to product type, and most of the products are VAC. So we're going to put in a default value, and we will say equals VAC. And then if you push tab, it comes in as that. I can type in VAC and it will, and push tab and it will say it equals. But our default value equals VAC. So that's going to be the most commonly used one, so that when we add in new records, it will show up as VAC automatically unless we change it. Then we're going to do, for a drop-down list that we did in our product type, we added 3 different things in there. We added VAC, MC, or SUP. In the validation, or sorry, in our drop-down list. So we're going to tell it that it needs to equal VAC or equals, and you don't even need the equals, but I'll put it in because it's asking for it here. MC or, make sure it's an or, not an and, okay? Or equals SUP as the validation rule. because those are what's in our drop-down list, but that's going to be the only thing that we're allowing in there. So validation rule of VAC or MC or SUP. And now we're going to tell it what the rule is. So must be VAC, MC, or SUP. Now, if I was doing this correctly, I would say that in this text it must be VAC for, and I would in brackets put what that was for, and MC I would explain it, because so far it doesn't really explain what those are supposed to do. But what this does is it stops them from putting anything else in, and I have put in my text that says what they're doing wrong. Okay, so it's not explained very well. I would explain it a little bit better if it was a database that other people that are not familiar would be using. But for now, we'll just leave it the way the book says so. Okay. So we're going to save all of this. So I'll just go up there and push save, or I could close my table and open it up, or I could go back to data sheet view if I wanted to, but I'll just save it. But once I save it, it says, well, we've changed some stuff. The first one, it says that we changed a field to be shorter. So the data that we had typed, if there was data longer than 255 characters and we dropped it down, or up to 255 characters, we dropped it to 20, so anything between them would have been lost. And we're okay with that. We only had postal codes in there, zip codes, so that's fine. So we'll say yes, we want to continue. And then it will come up with another one that says your rules have changed. So existing data may not be valid for the new rule. Now, what happens is these data integrity rules have been changed, but they're not asking permission to change them. They're saying, do you want to go through and test the new rules to see if anything happened? Now, you can say yes or no. If I say yes, or if I say no, this will just disappear. If I say yes, it will run through and test the data rules, but because there was only 3 fields, or 5, I guess, 5 records, it didn't have any problem with that. But if you had thousands of records and it was going through and doing the test, then you would be more willing to say no, please don't do that. Okay, so we have saved those. And now we're going to change this and look at the actual table itself. So we changed a few things. We're going to, let's say we go into our product type and try and change this to something else. Let's change this to hub. Okay, we made a mistake and we just typed hub. Okay. Our error comes up and says must be VAC, MC, or SUP, and you're like, oh, I guess I spelt that wrong. So I'd go back and change it. And then I have to say okay, and then go and fix it to whatever it was supposed to be. So my error comes up and says that. Also, you'll notice that VAC is the default, and it dropped it down here, even though I don't have a record down there. And that's perfectly fine, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do, is it's a default value, that's why it shows up down there. The other thing that would happen is if I tried to add too many records to this, you see it said I could only do 20, so I can't type any more in here than was already there. So it only allows me to type in 20 records. Now I have to watch there. That's right. So I'm trying to break all the rules to make sure my rules worked. The other rule was that quantity. So in quantity, I'm going to change this and make it 5,000. Okay, so I typed in 5,000 instead of 50. And it says that it must be greater than 0 and at most 1000. Okay, so these errors that I typed in, the error messages, are coming up very nicely. So I'll say OK, and I'll just get rid of all the extra zeros that I put in. So I was just testing my rules. Okay, so now I'm going to close my veterinary vendors table, and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so now we're going to make a few additional changes to the database, mainly a beautification stuff, field sizes that don't show, or update some products, or add some lines and that kind of stuff. So we're just going to do some general additional changes to our database. The first thing we're going to do is open up our veterinary vendors table. And we need to fix an address in here. So the street address of the Gaines Vet Supply is 320 West Haven, and I guess it's supposed to be 320 West Haven Boulevard. So we type that in, Boulevard. It doesn't show the whole address, so what we're going to do is just double click on the line between it so that it shows up the whole address, because we want to be able to see everything that's on there. So we fix that. We've got it so that it's best fitting, so whenever I do the double click, it's best fitting. We're also going to update the product types for a few of our vendors. So we did an update query to just update all of those, but for record 3, so the ID 3, we're going to change them to an MC, and we're going to update Rodriguez Vet Supplies, and we're going to make him a SUP. So we fixed those up and got them in there so that they're exactly what we want it to be. We're then going to add to the other table. So I think we have another table so that we can put in the rest of the treatments. And I'm pretty sure that goes into our appointments. So we're going to open up the appointments table, and we're going to do the drop-down list for our patients. So patient ID F1 needs to have a T3 appointment and a T10 appointment. And then number 2 needs to have a T4 appointment, a T7 appointment, and a T14 appointment. And then the third one, C2, needs a T2 appointment, only one. And then number 4, that patient there needs a T1 and a T8. So I'm just updating their records. And then finally for the 5th appointment, it is a T4 and a T7. All right, and it's all veterinary. We're not going to change anything there. So we've now added the ones that are required in there. We can resize this column so that we can show them all what treatments are required for everybody. We're also going to close the appointments table and save the changes. And we'll close the veterinary table and save the changes. So next we're going to open up the veterinary vendors table again, and this time we're just going to add a total row at the bottom. So if I click on totals, it shows up as a total row here, and maybe I want to keep that total in my total amount. I can say it says sum. So if I needed to have a total row in there, that's exactly what I would do. So now I have the totals for the total amount, and maybe I want to double click just so that I can see what everything is there. Maybe I'll take it off. No, that's good. If I remove it, yeah, it says to remove it. So when I want to remove it, I just click the totals button again, and it comes off. Next, I'm going to change some grid lines so that it only shows the horizontal lines, not the vertical lines. So it's in my text formatting area. I have a drop-down list for my grid lines, and I just want horizontal lines. So it got rid of all of those other ones. And that's really just a beautification process that we're doing right now. Maybe I want to change the colors and the font in that database. So I still have the veterinary vendors table open. We want to have an alternate row color button. So what we're going to do is we will go to this alternate row color button right here and click that. And what we're going to choose is that we want to have a brown color, alternate rows. And so this sort of just shows us what the color palette is. I didn't like that one at all. It's kind of ugly, isn't it? So I don't know, we're keeping that one. So it says click brown. So we got that one. So then we want the standard color and the dark color for the font. Let's see what else we can go. Oh, it wants that. Okay, so it wants to change the font color now. So we'll go up to the font color, and we're going to change the font color to this purple. Really? Doesn't sound right, does it? Doesn't even make sense. I don't like any of that. That doesn't look good. Brown as the alternate color. There you go. Doesn't look good at all. Click the font color and then the dark blue. Oh, maybe I was supposed to click dark blue. I clicked the wrong one. Dark blue. That's not any better. And then we want to change the font to Bodini MT. So we'll just change this to something I've never used before, Bodini MT, not black. And then it says if that font isn't there, just use anything you want. And we'll change the font size to 10 for some reason, make it smaller. None of that makes sense. Okay, so I think maybe that orange is a little awful, but whatever. That's the font color they want. Okay. Now it says to close the data sheet without saving the changes. So I guess all of those changes we made, we're not keeping them anyway, which is probably a good idea because they're really ugly, aren't they? Okay, so I'll just close that. Oh dear, I probably made some changes that I was supposed to change. Save, but I'll... No, we're not going to save that. Okay, so we close them without saving the changes. Okay, so now we're going to run a query, but this time we're just going to run a query with multi-valued fields. So when we created our lookup values, we did multi-valued fields, the T1 to T14. So we're going to just create a query using those. So we want to create a query. So we'll start with query, and we want to use query design. And we want the veterinary vendors field to be there. And we are going to create a query that displays appointment. Oh, I don't want this one. I'm going to remove the table, and we want appointments table. So I'll bring in appointments table. I had the wrong table. So we want the appointments table. So we want to display the appointment ID, the patient ID, the appointment date, the treatment number, okay? And the treatment number for the appointments table. So we have those. So you'll notice that this one was a little bit different, treatment number, and it has treatment number. That's because it is a multi-valued field. So it's just a little bit different. We're going to treat it a little bit differently. So now we're just going to run that. So I'll click run. And it has all the appointments. Actually, I didn't put that in. I'm surprised it didn't work. So let's go back and take a peek. I think I forgot something here because it wanted to have appointment ID, patient ID, appointment date, and I forgot to put in the treatment number. Look at that. I forgot to put that in there. Okay, so I will run that again. And it comes out with the appointment ID, the patient ID, the date of the appointment, and the treatment number. So let's say instead of having the treatment numbers listed like this, you could run a query and they would all be on their own line so that each appointment showed one line of what the treatment was going to be instead of like this. So we might want to see them on separate rows rather than on the single row. And that's going to allow them to focus on the treatment that's needed. So we're going to go back into our design view in order to fix that. And we still have the same things that are going on. We want appointment ID, patient ID, appointment date, and treatment number. So we're going to click into treatment number and just use your arrows. And we want to go all the way until we get to the end of the word, the end of the field name. Oops, did I go too far? Treatment number. Okay, one more till we get to the, there it is. Okay, and then we're going to just put in a period. Okay, as soon as I put in a period, it actually wants me to, because this is a query, it wants me to tell it which appointment in the multi-value field I should use. But I want it to just stay with the word value. So what that's going to do is, because I put the decimal or the period in there and value, it's going to run with all of the values on separate lines. If the word value doesn't come up, then feel free to just type it in, okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to run that a little bit differently, and each page has its own value on it. So appointment ID is still the same, but it just ran it on its own line. Okay, so that's using a multi-value list. So we're going to save this query. So I'm going to use my Save As button that I put up here. And I'm going to save that as a query. And we're going to save it as M03Q02. Okay, hopefully I didn't miss a query because it's a 02 query and I don't see an M301 query. But I'll probably find that I forgot it. Okay. So yes, we got that. And we can test this existing query with a multi-valued field. Okay, so I'm going to close this query. And now, because there's some queries that we have created down here with our chapter 2 or module 2 that don't have the multi-valued field in it, we're going to update that. So we're going to open up the appointments and treatments query. Okay, and it says that the multi-value field appointments is not valid in the specified join clause because we added it and it's not valid. Okay, so I'm going to say okay. So what I have to do is right mouse button click and go into design view. Okay, so I have to go into design view. I'm going to click on the line and I wanted to delete it, so I clicked too much. I just wanted to click on the line and push delete. Okay, So I removed the join. Now I'm going to join the treatment number dot value field. So the treatment number, maybe I'll go a little bit bigger. Okay. Let's move that over a bit so we can see it. The treatment number value field in the appointments table to the treatment number field in the treatment cost table. Okay, so we're going to join those. So we'll go to the treatment number value to the treatment number. Okay, so we've joined them so that we know what the treatment number value is. And we will run the query. So we had to fix that. Okay, so our treatment cost and our treatments are in here as well, but it doesn't have our T's in there, which is surprising because treatment 1, treatment 2, it should really have our treatment 1, treatment 2's in here. Okay, so we'll close that up. Design of the, sure, yes I do. So we're done with that. We just had to test it and make sure that the multi-value query was going to work. So now we're going to look at referential integrity. So we have two, or when you have two related tables in a database, it's essential that the data in the common fields match. So there shouldn't be patients in the patient table whose owner ID is 02, for example, unless there's a record in the owners table whose owner ID is 02 or 02. So we have to have the actual owners table available. There has to be that owner. You have to be attached to that. The restriction gets enforced through what's known as referential integrity. So it is the property that ensures that the values in a foreign key must match that of another table's primary key. So you can't enroll students in a class that doesn't exist, is basically what's happening. So the foreign key is a field in one table whose values are required to match the primary key of another table. So in the patient's table, the owner ID field is a foreign key, and that must match the primary key of the owners table. So we're going to look at the relationships. So we're going to go into our database tools and look at our relationships. And we're going to say we want to specify a relationship and enforce referential integrity to a couple of tables. So our first table is going to be our owners table. So we're going to drag up our owners table, and we have all of the information on our owners, and we're going to have patients. So the patients can only be attached when they're attached to an owner, okay? So we have an owner ID in this table is the primary, it's the primary key in the owners table. But over here in the patients table, it's a secondary key. So in order to enforce referential integrity, we're saying you can't have a patient with an owner ID who doesn't exist. Okay, so we're going to enforce referential integrity and make sure that we can't enter an owner ID that doesn't exist in the patients table. So it's just fudging, and we can't do that. So we're going to drag owner ID from the owners table to the owner ID in the patients table. Okay, so we have owner's ID to the owner's ID in the patients table, and we're going to enforce the referential integrity. Okay, what this does is it says that we can't have one unless it exists in the owner's table. If we want to cascade the update related fields, so all we're doing is we're going to update any of the related fields that it belongs to. And we don't want to cascade delete related records. We're not going to worry about that one. But all we want to do is make sure those two are clicked. The relationship is a one-to-many, which means that there is one owner, but it can have many patients. And now we're going to create that relationship. And it says we have one-to-many. Okay, so we have created the relationship. We're going to save this relationship. So if I try to close it, it will say, do you want to save it? And I'm like, yes, I do. Now we're going to go into the patients table and the owners table. Okay, actually, I'll close the patients table because we'll just look at the owners table. So now we have a plus sign here. And this is really interesting because it's forced referential integrity. You can tell it's done because there's pluses there. And when I click that plus, it shows all of the patient IDs and the patients for this owner. So all of them we can see, and these are known as subtables. And what you can do is you can use these sub data sheets and enter and change stuff if you want to, especially if you made a mistake or if you want to add a new patient to them, that you can certainly do that. So all of this shows that who is the owners and who are their patients. And this is why you can't, now that we've enforced referential integrity, you can't have a patient that isn't attached to an owner. Okay. So I don't think we have to change anything, but we're fine to go. We'll just close this up. And I think we're done. Oh, we have one more thing to do. And that is that we need to order some records and then we're done. All right, so all we need to do here is to order our records. We're going to open up our owners table. And in this case, we want to change the order in which they appear using the ascending and descending buttons. So all we're going to do is open the owners table, click the city field, owner's city field, and we can do it, of course, numerous ways. We have a sort up here with our ascending. We could also do it with the drop-down list. But for now, we'll use the ascending button up here, and it's sorted by owner city. So you'll notice that the owner ID is all mixed up, which is fine, and we sorted it by the owner city. So there's really not too much interesting that has to happen there. So we can do it by state as well if we wanted to. We could sort ascending by state. But yeah, that should be it. You can do it any way you want. So that is going to be it. We don't want to save the changes on this one. I'll say no. And I'm going to whip this up and see if there's anything wrong. But other than that, that should be it for Module 3, Maintaining a Database. Okay, so a final thing is I ran it through and found that I was right. I was missing a query called Module 3, Query 1. So I had Query 2 here, but I forgot to save the query as Query 1. So I got dinged for that one. So I'm going to create that query in Query Design. And that query was the appointments table. I'll drop that over. And it had appointment ID, patient ID, appointment date, and treatment number. And if we ran that, it was the query that looked like that. I was supposed to save it. So I created it, I will save that as M03 query 01. Okay, and that was pretty much all I got wrong, so that should be it. I will submit and save and move on.